Retro Future.
Hello Ethernet, this is Bonsert of Radio Retro Future. I've been getting a lot of requests on the topic of world building, and it so happens I'm working on a video for the Steampunk Beginner's Guide on that topic. That brought me back to a game I once did a let's play of called Too Close to the Sun by Italian studio Storm in a Teacup. Too Close to the Sun is a first-person game. Some would call it a walking simulator, as the gameplay is very limited. You walk, you observe, and you solve a puzzle from time to time. But I don't want to talk about that. Game reviewer Yahtzee, the man behind the series Zero Punctuations, opens his review on Too Close to the Sun by saying it walks a very thin line between homage and ripoff. Most notably a ripoff of BioShock 1. If you're not familiar with the world building of BioShock 1, check out our review of that game. Link is in the comments section. Now I'll make some comparisons to BioShock here, but while playing Too Close to the Sun again, I realized that despite all its clear influences from BioShock, the creators didn't seem to understand what made BioShock's world building so great in the first place. The footage shown here is from Too Close to the Sun. For a moment you may have assumed this is the city of Rapture from BioShock, but no, this is the ship the Helios, but still effectively a city on the sea. And that's the problem. It's not just the Art Deco design or its atmospheric corridors. The entire storytelling and the world building is taken almost whole cloth from the BioShock series, be it in the wrong ways. But I'll make a separate video on the storytelling and the world building differences in a separate video, because I find it so intriguing how they failed in that regard. And that makes me appreciate walking simulators like Soma so much more. But let's focus on the Helios. It hits all the familiar tropes BioShock popularized. The evidence of the mayhem that took place, the notes you find, audio recordings and radio messages. It is abundantly clear where it got its inspiration from. But does that make it a rip-off or a homage? Copying styles or aesthetics don't make it a rip-off. For one, we must consider BioShock's place in gaming history. In a time where first-person shooters were reduced to Armored Marines fuck yeah, and other genres of games were almost neglected, gamers and critics started to lose faith in gaming as an art form. BioShock changed that. Not only did it manage to innovate on gameplay, it managed to create an engrossing story and a believable world. It also has philosophical ideas behind it that gamers still discuss to this day. It also created one of the most memorable characters in gaming history. Andrew Ryan, the objectivist founder of the underwater city of Rapture, a man dedicated to reason and free enterprise till his vision of Rapture got so undermined he created the very tyranny he fled from. A character so powerful, many games attempted to recreate him ever since. This includes the people who conceived him in the first place.
A slave obeys.
Too Close to the Sun is no exception. But in the latter game, Ryan is replaced by...
Nikola Tesla speaking, and unless it wasn't already obvious, this ship is under strict quarantine.
Now before I continue, if this video compels you to play either game, play Close to the Sun first. It's not terrible, and graphically it's beautiful, and quite frankly, I will use scenes from this game in my background more often. But right now, I'm more engrossed in Star Sector, a unfinished game of dubious graphical quality, which is about me and my fleet destabilizing entire interstellar economies. My point is, you got to really enjoy walking simulators or retrofuturism to actually enjoy this game. Because if you're looking for good gameplay, or if you are a horror fan, you will be deeply disappointed. Now when I heard about Tesla's inclusion, my first response was... Really? That Tesla has great potential is without a doubt. Could he really create a city like that of the Helios as he has done in this game? Maybe. But to make him go full Andrew Ryan as he does here is stretching my suspension of disbelief. I'm gonna be honest, I have not finished Too Close to the Sun. I've simply not been able to compel myself to. But this is also irrelevant to the points I want to make. The problem with Too Close to the Sun is how the writers beat you over the head with its references and homages. It is impossible for me to enjoy this game, especially its story. The inclusion of Tesla and other historical figures is actually terrible. Instead of exploring his worldview or personality, they use him as a kind of a narrative shortcut. Hey, you know Tesla? Well, that's him. and they don't feel any need to elaborate on who he is, where he came from or how he got there. And that is what bothers me so much about Too Close to the Sun. Even before entering the Helios, my mind goes like this. Then you can even hear the cry of a creature that sounds eerily similar to a Big Daddy.
Remember Bioshock? Remember Rapture? Remember and holy shit, is that Tesla? Oh look, he has a rivalry with Edison! That is such an innovative take! Remember Dead Space?
It is impossible to look at Too Close to the Sun without being remembered of Bioshock at every moment. It even includes similar hallucinations and people wearing carnival masks. And this is a problem, especially because Bioshock is a superior product you could be playing instead. It also expects the player to know exactly who all these historical figures are. And it's not a bad thing per se, but everything is so on the nose. Even its very title and other references to the Icarus myth are far too obvious to be clever. Yes, Too Close to the Sun takes place on Helios where experiments have gone horribly wrong as mortal men dabble with forces they do not understand. And that criticism comes from a guy who uses these very names in his fiction as well. But there's a difference between a reference and rubbing your story's metaphors into the audience's face without restraint. And restraint is one of the key words here. The writer started putting science and historical tropes on paper and didn't know when to quit. And it wouldn't surprise me in the least if they intended Rose, the protagonist, to be the sister of the actual Ada Lovelace. This despite Lovelace's contribution to science being extremely exaggerated to the detriment of other women within the scientific enterprise, like Marie Curie, Henrietta Ayrton, Lisa Meitner and Margaret Knight. But oh well, not everyone can solve mathematical equations for a project that was never completed. Anyway, more on the superheroification of historical figures another time. To get back on point, many games have adapted Bioshock's way of environmental storytelling and audio conversations. The Dead Space series is one of the most successful in that regard. These worlds copied its techniques, but not its setting. With the creators of Too Close to the Sun stayed away from the Art Deco and the City in the Sea theme, it would have gone a long way to be unique. Both in style and world building, it is so similar it's distracting. It's like the Star Wars films keep throwing in characters from the original trilogy to remind their audience they could be watching those instead. No, it is not all bad. I like that Rose, the player, and her sister Ada have personal connection and banter. I like how Rose has a breakdown when she comes by the first mutilated corpses she sees. It's a nice change from the typical male protagonist from the Bioshock games who don't flinch from the ultra-violence at all. In that regard, turning Bioshock into a walking simulator doesn't seem to be that bad of an idea. But there's always this nagging voice in the back of my head while Rose has her imminent breakdown. It made me wonder what the creators were going for. Is this intended as an homage? Or are they trying to pull Disney and are just recycling old concepts to draw in an audience looking for something familiar? This also begs the question, what is a good homage? A common form of homage is imitation, for example a cover or tribute band. But in the case of a cover, we expect there to be some changes. For example, the addition of the artist's own interpretation or use of different voices or instruments. A tribute, on the other hand, tends to be a replica of a song or a genre as a whole, but often does so with the recognition of its flaws. For example, the band Steel Panther. On the surface, it's a hair metal band, but it pays homage to its aesthetics, its lyrics, and its sexualized depictions of both men and women in a way that seems quaint to us now. And they do so with very little restraint. In a meta way, song titles like Asian Hooker and Glorial offend us today in the same way hair metal bands offended parents in the 80s. In that regard, it is both a satire and an homage to a genre of music that was. And I'm sure it made some people look up their old Bon Jovi and Guns N' Roses mixtapes. But Steel Panther can stand on its own as a band, although the joke might be lost on people who have not experienced this type of metal culture. But can Too Close to the Sun stand on its own? Sure, but in my case I would probably only enjoy it without experiencing Bioshock first. Reference isn't a bad thing. A matter of fact, it can tie stories and themes together. Even in the original Star Wars movies, the characters repeat similar lines in the movies. Final Fantasy games will likely always contain a character named Sid, and sci-fi stories will always have references to older science fiction writers. But there's the main problem. We know Star Wars, we know Final Fantasy, Dead Space and BioShock. If we know these franchises, we can also name unique things about them. Darth Vader, Chocobos, Necromorphs, Plasmids. This despite them being clearly based on older fiction and games. What does Too Close to the Sun contain that is unique? It took the city's form and the storytelling from BioShock. It does not innovate on gameplay in any way, shape or form. It does not explore the alternate history, despite its setting, and even dares to go straight into the Lovecraftian. And the writing and attempts at horror are possible at best. And that is what makes it a ripoff for me. It simply has no unique elements, no character, no originality, just a very good looking environment that's beautifully crafted. But in the end, it fails to deliver on the story, leaving it to be nothing more but style over substance. I hope you enjoyed this video. As I said, I will make a follow-up video on why Close to the Sun failed where BioShock succeeds. But first I want to finish my video on world building so I can provide more context. Before I leave you, I want to thank my patrons on Subscribestar, Kathy Ma and CBG Spender. Thank you so much for your support. If you want a shout out at the end of my videos, please go and support us on Subscribestar, link down below. Your help would be greatly appreciated. With that being said, as always, make things your way.